Hi, this is Dr. Scott Young, and today we're going to do the second of the series, Essence of NESARA. Now, I first did one that isn't exactly like everything else, and they're all going to be a little different here. But what the basic idea is to walk through the steps. Now, the first one you can see that is in the series is really about with Eric Weinstein, and he's talking about elections. Will there even be one? And we'll dive in a little bit more when we get to term limits. This time, though, we're going to talk about will gold destroy the Fed? So let's just jump up to it and we'll kind of see what happens. Now, if you haven't heard this, and many of you have already heard it a million times, don't buy this stupid, QFS crypto. Don't believe that you have to do anything for on a QFS account. It's already going to be taken care of for you. Okay. If you ever want to know, and I had someone, he donated like, 25 bucks and then took it away. He was totally confused about this. I've got thousands upon thousands of idiots trying to like fake me. If you go to drscottyoung.com, you can actually find the real social media sites. Okay. So that's just something to kind of consider as you go along here. All right. So let's hit this a little bit. And here's one of the things. The 17th letter really talk about NESARA. There's a real interesting thing that's happening too, is Judy Shelton just came out with a book about a gold-backed currency. And it's been long purported, even by Trump when he was in office, that he wanted Judy Shelton as the Fed chairman. Now, if you hear me that I've said the Fed is dead, well, what I'm saying is in essence, it is dead. Now, you still need the Fed in the transition phase to help Treasury. Now, some of you believe that Janet Yellen is the Fed, or excuse me, the Treasury chairman. Janet Yellen is some moron that is useless to she's a clown. She doesn't know anything about economics. When you listen to Biden's economic advisor, the guy couldn't even explain a fiat currency to people. It's just, it's stupid, right? They're just a whole bunch of childish idiots who don't know anything about it. Judy Shelton's actually been working with Steve Mnuchin. Now, you might go, wait, Steve Mnuchin, wasn't he part of the Treasury in Trump's time frame? Yes. And guess what? They're working on the gold-backed currency continually. They are working together. And then she writes a book about a gold-backed currency. It's coming out like October 8th. Not a coincidence. Okay? Why is gold so distasteful to the Fed and the economists? It freaks them out because it locks them in. And we'll show you more about that kind of thing too. Oops. Why have they never changed back from the gold to a fiat? Why did they went away from the fiat? And you can understand that a little bit more if you go through the NESARA Explained series, okay? But like, why did they go away in 1933 and then 1971, where they fully went off the gold standard? It's because they want to have control. Gold doesn't let control happen. Now, the post 2619, this was done in 2018. So remember, this is a long time ago comparatively. And someone asked a question, an anonymous person asked a question, do we have the gold? And it says, yes, gold will destroy the Fed. And then references this, Judy Shelton gold standard statement, okay? Why would the 17th letter, this is a group of generals, white hat generals, who are telling you a story with that too. Why would they reference Judy Shelton? And there is a very strong reason for that, okay? This is the planned destruction of the Fed. And so many people do not get NESARA because they can't imagine us being away from the Fed. And the answer is the Fed is the cancer. If you are a cancer doc, and I know there's a lot of proportions about different things that we could do, but if you were like trying to dig out every single little piece of the cancer, but you really didn't attack it. You were just taking out the liver, and you were taking out, portions of a bowel or whatever, and you go, well, why didn't you go after the cancer itself and take that out? The tumor issue. I mean, there are really delicate points that happen. For instance, as an audiologist, because we know the neck up in anatomy and physiology, and there's a very heavy conversation I had in grad school. And one of the things that when you have a benign tumor that's not really growing versus a neuroma tumor, which means a growing kind of tumor, okay, an aggressive level tumor. When you have aggressive level tumors, what you tend to do, and especially if it's on a nerve, you will cut both sides of the nerve. Well, if you do that to the ear, you make it effectively deaf for the rest of that person's life. And I'm not just talking about sort of deaf, sort of can hear. They will hear zero. And I remember in grad school, one of the patients I had who was perfect hearing person and had some really nutty circumstances, and we identified that she had bilateral both ears tumors. And the argument right before I left, and I never really even got to find the answer. I wish I could get with some of the old professors who would remember it, but it was like, the argument was it a neuroma that they were going to cut the tumors out, which means cut the nerves, and she would be deaf for the rest of her life. She'd need to use sign language, or could they just remove the tumors, right? Well, here's the thing, related to the Fed issue, we need to remove completely the ability with that too. We don't just need to cut the cancer out and leave, some of the systems around. The cancer is the Fed, okay? And that's what they're saying here. This is one of the strongest recommendational statements that I can say about NESARA and the Fed, because the gold standard does it. Now, this is why I say this kind of thing. This is why when people say, it's just bogus, I mean, there's no information about it. And guess what? The Fed is dying every day that I've talked about them. Let's go through a little bit more. 13818, this was done in December of 2017, so a year before the time frame you saw a second ago with that particular post at 2619, was this executive order. And remember, it's perfectly timed with that too. It's nearly a year from that moment in time that 13818 came on. So what happens is that on December 20th, they were talking about 13818, and it says it blocks the properties of persons involved in serious human rights abuse or corruption. Let's kind of give you like the highlight of that particular thing. Human rights abuse and corruption undermine the values that form an essential foundation of stable, secure, and functioning societies, have devastating impacts on individuals, weaken democratic institutions. Well, that's a really interesting statement, because guess what? If you listen to that first video, it talked about democratic institutions. Now, we want to weaken the democratic institutions, because what those institutions are is the bad stuff that these idiots have put in place that are not part of the Constitution. They degrade the rule of law. They perpetrate violent conflicts. Oh, wait, wars around the world, right? Facilitate the activities of dangerous persons and undermine economic markets. The United States seeks to impose tangible and significant consequences on those who commit serious human rights abuses, engage in corruption, as well as to protect the financial system of the USA from abuse. And so what blocking the property really means, and it says a real interesting statement. It says, such properties or interests may not be transferred, paid, exported, withdrawn, or otherwise dealt with. What happened when I first read this, there was a group of us talking about this. One of them was Stana Surfing, who was instrumental in looking at some of the NESARA stuff. And and I'm internally grateful for some of the stuff that she was talking about. I didn't understand that I'd been thinking about NESARA since 2011. Um, I just hadn't put it together at that time frame. And I remember us talking about it in 2020. But what we were trying to suss out what this really meant. And what it really means is that it's not just like blocking a property, like you have a piece of property in Brooklyn, let's say, and suddenly they're going to block your access to get in there. Well, if you had a helicopter, you could fly in and do it. No, they're taking it away from that person. Blocking the property means there is no way to access those funds. And think the QFS, the quantum financial system, will block every bit of their capability of doing it. But to block it, you have to wipe them out as well. This is such a brilliant thing. In essence, it's the bankruptcy of the idiots. And it's because they have serious human rights abuses. And when you start understanding the depth of this one, it is the death of the Fed. And Dr. Walisa had a YouTube channel. I don't know if she still has it or not, but she put together this little piece here. This is from the 14th Amendment in 1868. That was validated at the time frame, or put out at the time frame. Under the fourth section, the validity of public debt of the United States, and we'll click to the green part. The United States or any state shall assume or pay any debt, or says, but neither the United States or any state shall assume the debt or obligation in aid of insurrection and rebellion against the United States. So it's saying, wait, the states won't engage in rebellion against itself. All such of those debts, obligations, claims shall be held illegal and void. When you understand that the Fed itself is against the laws of this land because they have instituted things like the IRS, which will be our next thing we'll highlight. What happens is that you have to wipe away their ability to access funds, because this is exactly what they've been doing to you for a very long time frame. And then throwing on debts instead of just taking away your funds, right? You make $50,000 a year. What they do is tax your funds and reduce your capability of funds, which is all the inflation stuff. They keep messing with you. And not only that, they have a sales tax on top of it. And then they put fines and penalties if you didn't pay your taxes. Let me tell you, the very first time I ever got audited, oops, sorry, I clicked the button there. Very first time I ever got audited. I remember this very clearly. As my wife and I were just married, we had a guy, and I think he passed away at this time, but he was a nice guy, but he was real old school, and we really needed to upgrade from him. And somehow, we were dual income, no kids at the time frame. We weren't making a ton of money. We always trusted him. She'd never had an issue. So it's her accountant, and then I'm kind of coming on the first time that we do this. And, somehow we had to owe like several $100s of taxes. And we had said, hey, listen, I don't want to pay too much. I don't want to get too much back. And I always learned that from a long time ago. We used to say, be within about $100 either way. I don't care, I just don't want to have money coming back. That's the fallacy of most people, is they want IRS monetization, monies coming back to them so they could go on vacation. I'm like, put it in a savings account. You can actually make more money. But they said you owe several $100s, right? And as we finished the end of the case, I owed like, and I'm going to make the exact number up. $1.87, something like that, right? I took pennies, nickels, and dimes and taped it to a piece of paper and sent that off with the letter. And it cost me almost as much to mail that thing, even in the early 90s, as I put on that piece of paper. I didn't care. I put so much tape on it, it was not funny with that too. They had to accept it. But this is what they do. This is how they mess with you. You see, they could tell you owe $1,000 or you owe an exact amount, but they never want to tell you that because they don't want you to really understand it. And that is part of the crime. And see, and that's part of a crime as well, just as much as their own personal serious abuses that they actually do. Now, see, here's why I tell you that the Fed is dying. Now, I want you to see two different things here. The dark blue are held to maturity securities, and these ones are available for sale securities. Okay, so here's what happens. Let me pull this off the screen for half a second. Okay, so held to term in essence. So let's just say, and I'm making up numbers here, okay? Let's say you buy a security at 50 bucks, right? Let's just say, and the amount of shares you put toward it is $1 million or a million shares or 50 million bucks, right? And you hold it to a term and make up numbers, 6 months, let's say. So you've got 6 months, and at the end of the 6 months, you're looking to see a return on investment. Now, when you put that much money, you are going to guarantee yourself. Now, I really recommend, it's very cabal, but it is very interesting. There is a series done by, I want to say Showtime or HBO, one of those two, but they're actually together. It's a show called Billions. And it's with Damian Lewis, who just plays this amazing billionaire. And there are just so many ways that he stacks the deck. It's so similar to what these people really do, okay? Now, what they do is that they're hoping to make $55 or make an extra $5 million. So they would take that $50 million, pay it back to the person they bought it from. So they had it on retainer in essence. And then they took that $5 million bucks and they were able to, now they have 55 million or 5 million more, and they go out and spend more for this kind of stuff. This is how they do it, right? And so they've made money in that way. Now, the second way is called available for sale. Now, it's a little bit more volatile. So yes, the same thing, 50 bucks and a million shares. So you put $50 million toward that. Because it's more volatile, you could actually drop it off at different time frames, but you have to have a buyer to do that, right? And so when you have to have a buyer to do that, it becomes this, but there's a higher potential return. So let's just say the potential could be 60 bucks you could get for it, right? So you're making $10 million more in essence. Well, this is what they've been doing for a very, very long time frame. So I want you to see some of this kind of stuff that's happened. This is why the Fed, now when it says these are the losses, these are the book values that are sitting on in the banking sectors, in the big hedgies, okay? And if you look over the years, 2008, really a tough time frame, right? They were in a minus kind of point. Now, here's where the banking people were funded back. How come they were making god-awful amounts of money when you and I were dying on the vine? Now, most people believe, if you watch the Too Big to Fail, that they got $250 billion. The reality, this is another false flag event, and they actually stole $83 trillion. This is how they made their extra billions in that time frame. Well, then there was a little time frame when Obama was in a second term in office and they were not making much at all. They made a little bit better. Then Trump gets in office and there's always a pause point that when you see between offices, there's always a pause or a loss that happens because they're not sure what's going to happen to that. Then guess what? Trump makes them lose money. Then they start to invest heavily, way more than they ever did in the late part of it. And then when Biden gets in office, you've got this a little bit of gain, but then now massive losses. These losses are so deep, it's never been seen. And the Fed is the lender of last resort. Now, many of these companies are holding on to this amount of money, and they can't keep doing this. It goes up and down. But if you were to actually drop this from your balance sheet, you would be wiped out. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in a company that might be only worth a couple $100 million, right? They're so overextended, it's not funny. And so this is the scary part for the systems, and that it comes back directly on the Fed. This is actually an interesting kind of article that was done at Trump and the gold standard. It talks about, former president was keen on returning us back to the gold standard, but could it really happen? And so, gold standard has been used since the 70s. Now, there's a lot of misunderstanding about this. 1933 was the date that we actually came off the gold standard from the American people. Now, internationally, the currency could be brought in or paid back to foreign agencies by gold, but it stopped in around 70, 71 with that 272. So it was a little bit of a time frame there during LBJ was in office, and then you get into Nixon kind of thing. And yet, a little bit of LBJ's to Nixon's kind of time frame. But in essence, one of the things that happens there is that they went away from this, and and they go, well, there's a lot of speculation in this time frame that we could have brought back the gold standard. And then again, we got a mention of Judy Shelton. It'd be wonderful to bring back the gold standard, but then they kind of say, Steve Bannon, he believes that number 45 could ditch the U.S. Federal Reserve and bring back the gold standard in a second term of office. Like, this is actually inferring the conversation that we're actually going to do. This is an ultimate standard of NESARA. And so that's why I'm trying to show you the actual situations out there. When we actually compare those, the fiat currency expands the currency and allows for tough times to bail out those institutions, like government-backed securities that we were talking about. It creates a governmental confidence, and then everyone has to buy into it, right? So they use the media and their economists and the economic schools, the Harvard business schools and other things like that, to go, you have to believe in the standards that we've set up, the inflation, the deflation cycles. All of that stuff are very, very good. And it's like, they're frauds with that too. And these people haven't paid attention to it. They're so married to it, they cannot divorce themselves from that concept. Whereas the gold standard is an incredibly stable currency, but it is not expandable. The government is stuck. They cannot spend more than they bring in. This actually kills inflation. It actually curbs their ability to spend. So it not just kills inflation, which means your paycheck is instantly more valuable 5 seconds after NESARA happens. I mean, you guys want to be paid back. So many people talk about bonds and want to be paid back, and I'm going, do you understand? Not just you'll get paid back by the debt, but when you go to a gold standard, everything has to actually respond. Now, some things might take 6 months or so before they flip back into the new standard points, meaning it has to have a trickle down effect when you have complicated supply chains that have, this electronic piece that goes into this piece, and then this electronic piece go into that. So if you're talking about like an iPhone or whatever, you're looking at all the things that might go into it. And then it takes time for that to reduce in price because, people can't take losses just right away, right? And so this actually is so perfect in that, but it increases the value, so production of the nation increases. Whoa, that's cool. It's not dependent upon whatever the government does or says. It's dependent upon how we see it. Now, it will be set by Treasury, the gold standard, or the amount of the gold currency with it too. And cabal governments hate it. They hate it they're crazy about it. Henry Ford, who created the assembly line, once said, "It is well that the people of a nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there will be a revolution before tomorrow morning. You guys need to start understanding the gold standard and what happens in here with this too. That's what I want to share with you first off. We're going to detail each one of these pieces of pie so that you can understand they're actually out there. Trump's talking about them in unique ways and ways that you really can understand. But I'm trying to share with you, when you listen to some of these gurus out there that are talking in the currency spaces, they go, well, the CIA is allowing it, or the Fed is behind this. And the answer is none of those people are behind this thing. This cannot happen with the essence, without the essence of NESARA in place. Does that help you kind of catch it a little bit more? You can go to Dr. Scott Young. You can download some cool things that talk about some of the areas of NESARA. We have articles and some other kind of fun things in there. You can also see the book that's sitting in the background called Revelations of the Red Pill. Thanks so much, guys.